Hello and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. I'm Aaron Porras here with ILTV's morning briefing.
United States Ambassador to the UN Nikki Haley announced her resignation yesterday, stating that she'll be leaving by the end of the year. And at the Oval Office on Tuesday, Trump praised Haley for her accomplishments, saying he would welcome her back to the White House at any time. Haley has been a strong advocate of the Jewish state, making headlines for her unwavering support of Israel and standing up for the ideals of freedom and human rights. She even took many stands against the UN itself and countries in the body attacking Israel, stating, quote, "The days of Israel bashing are over," and that nowhere has the UN's failure been more consistent and more outrageous than in its bias against our close ally, Israel, end quote. And this was consistent with her actions before taking the post, too. While serving as governor of South Carolina, Haley signed into law a bill to stop the BDS movement, which was the first of its kind on a statewide level. But during her time in the Trump administration, she also paved the way for new sanctions on North Korea, pulled the U.S. out of the United Nations Human Rights Council, and the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees. Israeli and Jewish leaders around the world praised the outgoing ambassador, with Netanyahu saying, quote, "I would like to thank Ambassador Nikki Haley, who led the uncompromising struggle against hypocrisy at the UN, and on behalf of the truth and justice of our country," end quote. President Reuven Rivlin chimed in as well, saying Haley, quote, "tore away the cynical smokescreen that was masking what the UN and international organizations were really doing," end quote. And finally, among many other supporters, AIPAC wrote on Twitter, "Thank you for consistently standing up for America's interests and our democratic ally Israel." But there are some with unanswered questions regarding the timing of her resignation. Many speculate that by announcing her departure just before midterms, she'll be avoiding being perceived as disloyal to Trump during what could be a departure of several other senior officials. Other speculations were that Haley is resigning in order to run for president in 2020, but she quickly put that to bed, saying that she will be campaigning for Trump's re-election. Now, as for her replacement, several politicians have been suggested to be on Trump's shortlist for the position, including former White House advisor Dina Powell and United States Ambassador to Germany Richard Grenell. Some have even speculated that the first daughter, Ivanka Trump, might be a frontrunner for the post, but Ivanka shot down that rumor in a tweet saying simply, quote, "I know that the president will nominate a formidable replacement for Ambassador Haley. That replacement will not be me," end quote. Meeting with the elite Dvorin unit, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman asserted that the Balkan terrorist Ashraf Walid Sulaiman Na'alawa will soon be captured. Lieberman met with the Dvorin unit in cooperation with the IDF and Shin Bet forces to conduct a search to apprehend 23-year-old Na'alawa, who shot Kim Levengron Yechezkel and Ziv Hajbi in the Balkan terror attack on Sunday. But despite the amount of time that's passed, Lieberman and Prime Minister Netanyahu have both expressed optimism about capturing the terrorist. Netanyahu said, quote, "that from the report I've received this morning, I expect it won't take long before this despicable perpetrator is apprehended. I have faith in our security forces," end quote. IDF and Shin Bet forces are conducting extensive searches in the terrorist's village as well, and have arrested suspects that assisted him in the attack. Palestinian security officials said that they're assisting as well, as the terrorist is more likely to surrender to them, but they reiterated that there is full coordination between all security forces on this manhunt. Meanwhile, Dani Danon, head of Israel's mission to the UN, presented photos of the two victims, Kim Yechezkel and Ziv Hajbi, at the UN after the world body remained silent for 2 days without condemning the killings. With both the Jewish conversion laws and Haredi military conscription laws on the back burner, many in the government are watching to see if the coalition will call for early elections. Netanyahu met earlier this week with his 3 coalition party heads, Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon of Kulanu, Shas Chairman and Acting Interior Minister Aryeh Deri, and Education Minister from Habayit HaYehudi Naftali Bennett, to discuss the ongoing negotiations on the conversion and conscription issues. And reports show that all 3 left the meeting thinking that Netanyahu would be better off holding elections now, before the court-imposed December deadline on these conflicts. The Knesset returns from summer recess next week, and elections are set to be held anyhow by November 2019. But the government could initiate an early election with a simple vote. Adding to the suspicion that early elections will be held is the fact that Netanyahu's ruling Likud party just gained power in the Knesset according to a recent poll. According to the numbers compiled by Midgam, if elections were held today, the Likud would go from 30 to 32 seats in the Knesset. Yair Lapid's Yesh Atid party would also increase substantially from 11 to 18, while the Zionist Union would drop from 24 to just 12. Other parties were only marginally changed by a few seats at most. Now, all this aside, even if the Likud does hold and win early elections, the coalition may still fall apart. Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon has again reiterated that he would not under any circumstances support the coalition with Netanyahu at the helm if the Prime Minister were to be indicted. He said simply that, quote, "a prime minister under indictment and after a hearing cannot function," end quote. He continued to assume that Netanyahu would simply step down on his own under such circumstances, but added that if he didn't, everyone else will. Speaking of corruption probes, the LAHAV 433 anti-corruption unit of the police has now just arrested 2 senior officials with the Israel Land Authority and 5 additional individuals in connection to charges of bribery, fraud, breach of trust, and more. According to the police, the 2 Israel land officials accepted bribes in return for illegal insider information to be used in the buyers' businesses. And in connection to the investigation, the LAHAV 433 has already raided all the suspects' homes and offices. Quote, "The Israel police will continue to investigate any improper activities involving conflicts of interests and will dig down to reach any place where there is a suspicion of public corruption," the police said. And you can believe these words, as the LAHAV 433 unit, just this past week, broke 2 other bribery investigations wide open as well. In one, 4 members of the Selah family, which owns the Afikim bus company, were arrested for bribing a senior transportation ministry official in return for the rights to better bus routes. The senior transportation ministry official was also detained. In the other case, 2 individuals were arrested at Tel Aviv's Ben Gurion International Airport on suspicion of having bribed employees of Israel Aerospace Industries. This in exchange for weapon systems tenders being shifted to their advantage. The employees were apparently offered a cut of any deal that resulted from the malpractice, and the benefits were reportedly worth millions of shekels.
That's all for now. I'm Aaron Porras, and see you later with our main daily broadcast from Israel at 2 p.m. Eastern Time.